I'm a little nervous. I've never spoken in a church before. But I want to talk about what happened in the very beginning. And the very beginning, God created. And God created, God's name was Brahman, and he created four divisions of humanity in decreasing rank, with the highest, the Brahman, out of his head, and the lowest, the Shudra, out of his feet. Next. And this creation of mankind, the rules for how mankind was supposed to deal with one another were then laid down in what's called Manusmriti, or the laws of Manu, which is basically the equivalent of the law of Moses. It is the Hindu law book, and it lays out, for instance, that a Brahmin should have an auspicious first name, and Shudra, the low caste, should have a contemptible last name. A Brahmin should have a name that implies happiness. A Shudra, a name that denotes service. And it also lays out duties for these. The Brahmin, his duty is to be the lord of the whole creation. The Shudra, represented here in the photo, his duty is to serve the other castes meekly, basically to be a slave. This law of Manu, this Manusmriti, was affirmed by no less a personage than the Hindu preacher, probably the most influential Hindu preacher of the 20th century, Mohandas Gandhi, who said that it gives the qualities needed for the discipline of the mind for reaching the highest truth. Well, that all actually is a lie. That's not how it began. But that is how some people believe it began. And so here tonight, what I want to do is take no part in these unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. So to give you a little bit of perspective, the religious demographics of India are that basically India is 80% Hindu, 2% Sikh, 2% Christian, about 13-14% Muslim. And you can see the regional breakdown. Well, I want to talk, before I get to India, I want to talk about Nepal. And Nepal is very similar religious demographics. It is also about 80% Hindu. It is unique in that it is the only country in the world that has ever been officially a Hindu kingdom for 250 years about. And actually, as it wound down and ended up getting rid of the Hindu monarchy that it had, one of the ways that went out was that the crown prince, who, the royal family in Nepal, they were basically viewed as incarnations of Hindu gods, as divine. Well, the Hindu kingdom in Nepal kind of went out with a bang when the crown prince murdered multiple members of his family, including his father and mother, and then killed himself. This is changing in Nepal as far as the makeup of the country. They had a temporary constitution, they've abandoned monarchy, and they are working now on a permanent constitution, which was just adopted, I believe, in the past month. So this permanent constitution might offer some opportunities for change, but it's actually not really changing much, as it turns out. Secularism has been jettisoned, and the only nod in favor of maintaining secularism in the country is that the country acknowledges in the Constitution that secularism is defined as the state protecting Hindu religious culture. In addition, with this new constitution, the country wants to ban religious conversion. This happened actually as a result of pressure from India. India's Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, which currently rules India, met with the Nepalese government and encouraged them to institute a religious conversion ban. What are these Hindu nationalist organizations? They're actually defined by the United States State Department as holding to an ideology of Hindutva, basically holding to an ideology that anybody in India or in South Asia who's not a Hindu is foreign to the land and doesn't belong there. And they're represented in the ruling political party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, in the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, which is a social organization that's like the parent group of this political party. So, the result of this is that Christianity is on the brink of being outlawed, criminalized in Nepal. The religious conversion ban basically says that anyone who attempts to undermine or jeopardize the religion of another will be punished by law. And the terms being floated are 5 years, 7 years in prison for engaging in a religious conversion ban. So, back please. Well, religious conversion is being banned. Cow slaughter is also being banned under the Constitution. And it's been banned for a long time, but as it's being talked about more recently with the adoption of the new Constitution, police in Nepal are saying, well, we treat cow slaughter as homicide. And the penalties for it are, I believe, at the moment, 12 years in Nepal for slaughtering a cow. Next, please. So cows hold a very important place in Hindu religion. Again, as Hindu preacher Gandhi pointed out, the central fact of Hinduism is cow protection. And Hindus will be judged by their ability to protect the cow. She is, as he said, the mother to millions of Indian mankind. And there is a big push underway in India among radical, fundamentalist, extremist, supremacist, whatever term you want to apply, Hindus, to protect this mother. Now, I don't know about you, but if I called my mother a cow, I'd know exactly how she would react. In India, however, it's a very different story. The cow is virtually worshipped in India, and I say virtually, there's no need to qualify that. It is worshipped in India. Here on the bottom right, you can see the current prime minister doing obeisance to a cow. It's worshipped to such an extent that cow urine, cow dung, cow waste products are pushed as health cures. They're sold in health stores. They're even sold in the top left as a drink. In one of the major states in India, a cow urine factory has been set up with taxpayer dollars, and the cow urine is actually being used to clean state hospitals. So India's Hindus, basically, they won't eat cows, but they will drink their pee. And you can see here a list of states banning the slaughter, sale, or possession, in many cases, of beef. It is most of India. One of the most recent states to establish a ban is Maharashtra, which instituted a ban on everything, including possession of beef, and established a 5-year prison sentence if you get caught. That means if you eat a hamburger, you can go to prison for 5 years in Maharashtra. The term is actually, for cattle slaughter, is up to 10 years in some states. For beef possession, there are 5 states which actually criminalize it. So the cow in India is regarded as holy, but strangely, actually, if you go to India, you'll see cows wandering all over the streets. They're poorly kept, they're starving, they eat trash. In a place where it's regarded as holy, it's completely mistreated. So moving on, the point is that cows in India are safe, but humans are not. And case in point, this happened last month. A man was lynched for rumors that he was eating beef. What happened was people in a nearby Hindu temple made an announcement that this Muslim man may have been eating beef. So a mob of a couple hundred people went to his house, dragged him out of his home into the streets, used bricks to beat him to death, and then almost beat his son to death. And then you can see next, the people who have been arrested are linked to the political party, the BJP. And what this has done is really set a flashpoint in India as people are beginning to become increasingly concerned about the rise of violent Hindu nationalism, about lynching, about the government siding with the people that do the lynching. And as it turns out, the police, they went and they investigated this lynching. But what they did was they went into the man's home, into his refrigerator, and took the meat there and sent that off for analysis to determine if it really was beef. Because if it really was beef, well, then I guess it was okay to lynch the man. But they have begun to arrest some people, and as mentioned, they are local BJP affiliates. And not only the man, not only his son, but have suffered, but these people, by lynching him, they now produced a widow. And as you can see, she was also violently attacked. But the reality is that Hindu nationalism goes far beyond killing people for having the wrong diet. Another way in which it significantly manifests is in these anti-conversion laws, which basically criminalize religious liberty. And you can see here a map of India, that it is a major portion of India, which is 6 states, 7 actually have them on the books, but 6 only enforce them. And others have similar laws. These anti-conversion laws basically say that a person cannot change his religious affiliation without permission from the government. The terms vary, but basically you have to, if you violate the law, you can be sent to prison for up to 5 years. And they're designed to ban so-called forced conversion, but that's defined in these laws as including things like warning people about the wrath of God if they don't turn to God, as feeding people. Say a beggar comes up to you on the street, you give him some food, and then you turn around and share in my case, you share the gospel with him. These things put people at risk for being sent to prison for 5 years for forced conversions. And people are being arrested for this. This happened just a couple of weeks ago. 3 evangelists, Indian citizens, were arrested under charges of engaging in false or forced conversions because they wanted to show a film about Jesus, and people came forward and filed a case against them with the police. Well, the United Nations has spoken about this, and they've warned that these things threaten religious freedom. In particular, the first anti-conversion law of the 21st century, which was passed in the state of Gujarat, and requires that a person has to go and get permission from the local magistrate to convert, is singled out by the United Nations. And as this gentleman from the United Nations says, these laws, particularly in Gujarat, carry a high penalty, 3 years imprisonment, but they basically put the state in the position of saying that it is allowed to determine the genuineness of a person's conversion, that the state can look at a person's heart. Well, what we have now is the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party has taken power. They took party last year. And Narendra Modi, who actually 2 years after becoming chief minister of the state of Gujarat signed an anti-conversion law, last year became the Prime Minister of India. And beyond these anti-conversion laws, villages are taking action on a village level, and they're passing laws which criminalize, which ban non-Hindu religious activity. And then jumping to a national level from that village level, we have this man, the Home Minister of India, who's in charge of things like the CBI, which is the equivalent of our FBI, who's in charge of most domestic affairs of India. He last year called for a national anti-conversion law. And just a couple of days ago, I believe, these 2 members of parliament, who are both in the BJP, introduced bills in parliament which would, again, criminalize religious conversion without government permission. One of these MPs, MP Tarun Vijay, points out that the bill will advocate for a non-bailable warrant to be issued against any person found engaged in the act of converting with a 10-year prison sentence. And he warns, though, that from his perspective in India, foreign funds, and this is a common theme, that there's a foreign hand at work, that it's some nefarious scheme to come in and misguide simple, ignorant people, as in the case of Bhajan Singh talking about the Mughal ruler warning against the conversion of low castes to Sikhism. Same thing applies with the warnings that are issued by Hindus against conversions of people to Christianity. He warns that foreign funds are being used to seduce poor and vulnerable sections of our society. Well, the reality is that India is actually home to more poor people than anywhere else in the world. It's home to 1 out of every 3 poor people in the world. 67% of the population gets subsidized food grain from the government. That is, 670 million Indians also live on about 50 cents a day. And when we talk about Indians getting subsidized food grain, what that means is that 2 out of 3 Indians depend on the state for their daily bread. This means not that they're getting, like we would get here, food stamps, but that they are actually going to, as you can see, back please, they're actually going to a food depot where the government actually gives them grain. In my own mind, this is highly reminiscent of the days of Rome, of the bread and circuses that were handed out to people. So, my belief is that liberty is the mainspring of human progress, but the facts seem to indicate that the Indians have absolutely no liberty. As I contrast constitutions, I find a vast difference between that of the Indians and that of us here in the United States. The longest versus the shortest. In particular, there's no basic Bill of Rights in the Indian Constitution. And especially, all of the rights that are enumerated for Indian citizens in the Constitution are provisional. That means that, as this man warned, when the Constitution was being drafted, the rights Indians have are all entirely at the mercy of the legislature and can be taken away at whim. Beyond these anti-conversion laws, beyond these beef bans, there's just a slew of laws in India that really violate basic individual liberties, human rights, including the country has refused to sign the UN Convention Against Torture. Torture is basically legal in India. It's widely practiced by police and military. President's rule is very common, which is where the central government can arbitrarily choose to dissolve a state government and then step in and directly rule that government by dictate from Delhi, and so on and so forth. And these laws in particular allow the government to do things like ban dissent. And this has been used just a couple of months ago, earlier this year, when Christians were protesting vandalism of their churches. They were standing outside of a cathedral, and the police invoked what's actually a carryover from colonial Britain, a law that's a carryover from colonial Britain. They invoked a law that's still in the books that allows them to arbitrarily ban freedom of assembly in order to get protesters off the streets. Well, the Indian Constitution also, as Bhajan Singh mentioned, allows the establishment of a dictatorship. This happened for 2 years in the 1970s. And it happened because this woman, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was Prime Minister for 15 years of India, she was charged with election fraud, and in order to avoid dealing with these charges, she imposed an emergency. She suspended elections, she imprisoned and tortured her political opponents, and established a de facto dictatorship for 2 years. So these are the laws, these are the ways in which liberty is infringed for the average Indian citizen. But beyond that, we've also seen over the past 30 years some really egregious atrocities committed by the Indian government. Some full-scale massacres, genocides, many people term them. And you can see they've happened throughout quite a widespread area in India. The first one was in '84 in Amritsar. Mr. Singh mentioned that, where the Sikh Golden Temple was invaded. And Congressman Adolphus Towns of New York, back in '06, he actually he said that he believes that the invasion took the lives of over 20,000 Sikhs in Punjab. This invasion was a full-scale military invasion. It lasted for about 3 days. It occurred at the busiest day of the largest Sikh festival of the year, when there were thousands of pilgrims that were in the temple, and many of them were massacred. The U.S. State Department recognizes another massacre that followed up several months later. This one occurred in '84 in Delhi. And this one was also targeted against Sikhs. And it happened again, it occurred over a period of about 3 days. And witnesses say that the mobs that took to the streets for these 3 days were armed with voter rolls that identified Sikh residences and businesses. They targeted Sikhs based off of anybody that was wearing a turban. And they just went amok and ran rampage through the city and slaughtered. And when I say slaughtered, they burned alive, they gang raped, they dismembered, they committed many atrocities against Sikhs, killing several thousand, at least 3,000, which are acknowledged by the U.S. State Department. And next, please. This was done with full complicity of the Indian government. In fact, the California State Legislature earlier this year recognized that the Indian government was involved. And these are the people that were involved. They were members of parliament mostly, and they have been identified. They've been identified, each of them, by multiple witnesses. They've been in and out of court trials, with none of them ever resulting in a conviction for the past 30 years. And they've all experienced extreme political success as a result of participating in this genocide. You can see Kamal Nath, he became Union Minister for Urban Development. Jagdish Tytler, he also became a Union Minister. Amitabh Bachchan, he is a world-famous Bollywood film star. And other people that were involved that were linked to this include these police officers, Sumed Saini, go back please, Sumed Saini and KPS Gill. Sumed Saini is actually now the Director General of Police for Punjab, where this massacre at the Golden Temple occurred. Another massacre that came just a few years later was both in Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh and in Mumbai in Maharashtra. This time it was Muslims that were massacred. And again, it was with implication of leading political figures, including a man from the BJP named L.K. Advani. And about 2,000 people, according to the State Department, were murdered. Most of them were Muslims. And if you look at the bottom, there have been few successfully prosecuted, according to the U.S. State Department, despite the fact that what happened here was there was a disputed site, religious site, a mosque in India, that was this BJP leader, L.K. Advani, staged a rally at. There were about 150,000 Hindus there, and he incited them to violence, and they approached the mosque, tore it down, and then began massacring people. And the accused, again, L.K. Advani, he became Deputy Prime Minister of India. He's now a senior advisor to the BJP party. Rajnath Singh, he's also implicated. He is now, he was president of the BJP, and he is now Home Minister of India. And a more recent massacre was in Ahmedabad, which is Gujarat, which at the time was ruled by then Chief Minister Narendra Modi, now Prime Minister of India. And this happened just 1 year after he became Chief Minister of Gujarat. Again, armed with voter rolls that identified Muslim residences, Muslim businesses. For about 3 days, again, there was a pogrom in which mobs of Hindus took to the streets, massacred Muslims as well as Christians, burned mosques, burned churches, and if I can have a warning for people, I do have a couple of graphic pictures coming up, and just brutalized people to the most extreme fashions, dismembered people, burned people alive, gang raped people, so on and so on and so on. And the accused, the implicated political figures in this massacre, in this genocide in Gujarat, the primary accused is Narendra Modi. He's now Prime Minister of India as of last year. So, the last pogrom we want to talk about happened against Christians. And this happened in 2008 in Kandhamal, Odisha. And this is in eastern India. Again, this one actually lasted longer, lasted several weeks. Churches were burned as mobs took to the streets, went through villages, hunted down Christians. People were burned alive. And nobody has faced any kind of prosecution for it. In fact, one of the main accused, again, a leader in the BJP, in this case, a member of the Legislative Assembly, a state legislator, he was arrested and was tried, but he was let off and allowed to return to his post in the legislature. And again, these are some graphic images of what happened to people in Odisha. You can see churches burned. You can see a Christian girl that survived being burned alive. You can see the horrors that occurred as a result of it. The BJP was strongly linked to this. There was a nun that was gang raped in a high-profile incident, and the BJP was linked to that killing, or to that gang rape. So these massacres are a manifestation, they're an acute manifestation of really a chronic, ongoing problem in India. We see at times these massacres over a period of a few days, a few weeks, of thousands of people. Well, over periods of decades, thousands of other people from these same religious minority communities, Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs, have been more secretly and quietly slaughtered. This is one case in Punjab. Sikhs were, over a period of about 10 years, from 84 to 95, secretly disappeared by Indian police and cremated illegally to hide the evidence of the murders. This man, Jaswant Singh Kalra, discovered it, reported on it, and then as a result of taking his findings and reporting them to the Canadian Parliament, when he returned home to Punjab, he was picked up and he was murdered by Indian police in 1995. And the Indian police, this is no secret, they admit to it, they've put people on trial for this, low-level officers. But what they have never done is even bothered to address the killings of the people that he reported on. They've addressed the killing of the human rights defender, but done nothing about the killing of the people that he discovered. So, this happened in Kashmir, a little bit north of Punjab, the following year. This was against Muslims. This man was a human rights lawyer, Jalil Andrabi, and he reported a very similar pattern to what was going on in Punjab, which had been reported by Jaswant Singh Kalra, where again, over a period of about 10 years, the Indian government, Indian security forces were going in, abducting people, picking them up in the middle of the night, taking away tens of thousands of people, creating mass graves, murdering people in custody. And as a result of his activism, in fact, he reported his findings to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. He was murdered in 1996 by the Indian Army. So, wrapping up a little bit, we've established this pattern of violence over many decades that's being perpetrated by these Hindu nationalist organizations and by the Indian government in general. Well, We've got the BJP, the political party, which is one of two major political parties in India. The other one is the Indian National Congress. The BJP has a parent organization, which is a social organization called the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS. And this group links together several of these high-profile politicians in India who have been implicated in these genocides and these massacres, including L.K. Advani, Rajnath Singh, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And one thing they all have in common, beyond just belonging to this Hindu nationalist group, is that they all joined at an extremely young age. The oldest was 15. The youngest was Narendra Modi when he was 8. Well, what is this RSS? The RSS was founded in 1925. And it was founded by people who sought to promote an ideology, again, of Hindutva, of this idea that anybody who's not a Hindu is foreign to India. And it was founded explicitly as a fascist organization. From 1925 into the 1940s, these gentlemen, who were early leaders of the RSS, explicitly promoted links between Hindutva, supremacist Hinduism, and fascism, and explicitly admired the tactics of Nazi Germany and of other totalitarian states, with this man on the bottom, M.S. Golwalkar, who was actually one of the presidents of the RSS, actually praising Hitler for his treatment of the Semitic races of the Jews, and saying that it is a good lesson for us to learn and profit by. And then the man on the top pointing out that the RSS is an institution which desires to bring out the vividness of unity that fascism can provide people. Well, the RSS is basically India's brown shorts. Hitler had a famous organization, also a social organization, called the Brown Shirts. They wore brown shirts. The RSS wears brown shorts. They're all male, they're uniformed, they're militant, and they recruit people typically in their preteens. They maintain branches all across India with an unknown membership, but estimated to be up to 10 million. Members participate in regular trainings at their local branches, and these trainings consist of wearing a uniform, of marching on parade grounds, of learning to use weapons, and of chanting Hindu hymns. They also consist of marching around town. And if you've seen pictures from Nazi Germany of the brown shirts marching through town, then this probably looks eerily reminiscent, eerily familiar to you. Here we've got people on parade grounds, and then armed cadres, armed squadrons of these uniformed Hindu supremacists who, as we've just talked about, have been strongly linked, inexplicably linked by the United States State Department and a whole bunch of other people, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, so on and so forth, to these massacres, these pogroms, these genocides of religious minorities. So this present situation is frightening. We began with a man who was lynched for just eating beef. In fact, not even eating beef, but being rumored to be eating beef. Well, this happened a couple weeks after that. In southern India, a man abducted a 4-year-old child and engaged in a human sacrifice of him to the goddess Kali, who, as you can see, is not a very friendly personage. She's the goddess of death, essentially. She wears a skull necklace. This doesn't have it, but she also wears a belt of severed human arms. So, in conclusion, we see that there's basically no liberty in India. Violent Hindu extremism is on the rise, and it's met with total impunity and with complicity by the government. Religious liberty is criminalized. In fact, it's criminalized to such an extent that sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ is basically banned in India, and India is cut off as a mission field today to pretty much the entire Christian world. Indian Christians report being treated as foreigners and warn that India's underground church is on par with the underground church in China. Dehumanization attacks on human dignity are increasing at a dramatic rate. State-sponsored massacres of minorities are staged with total impunity by both major political parties. And human rights defenders, people who document and report on these things, are murdered in retaliation for it by the very people that they're reporting on by the Indian government. So what we can do, what we all must be doing, and what I am seeking to do here today, is to abide by these words of the prophet Isaiah, which are that the righteous path, the correct thing to do, the only answer in response to these atrocities is to learn to do good, to seek justice, to correct oppression, to bring justice to the fatherless, and to plead the widow's cause. Thank you for your time.